So once again, the need has arisen to create a do not buy video. I've only ever made one such video in the past, and that was for Chocobo GP, which will be linked down below if you want to watch it. I've never wanted to focus on the negative side of gaming, as there's already a million other people doing that. But when something comes along that genuinely bothers me, I will put my opinion out there. I'm actually working on a completely unrelated review right now, but I wanted to quickly put this video together as somewhat of a PSA or a warning for potential buyers. Now, of course, there could be something that I don't know about, or perhaps a very good reason for these problems, but this video is based on the information that I have at the time of recording. In my opinion, this kind of thing really needs to stop, and these publishers and/or developers have to be held to task. They just seem to keep doing it, and the thing is, every time we accept mediocrity or broken products, we're effectively sending the message that it's okay, and it absolutely is not. You know, I normally go into detail about what the game is and how it all works, but in all honesty, after playing this complete disappointment, I'm just going to give you the info you need, my opinions, and nothing more. This is also just supposed to be an upgrade of an existing game that doesn't really add much to it, so yeah, I'm going to skip most of the game info and attempt to get to the point. The Ultimate Edition of Warhammer 40K Inquisitor Martyr, which released on the 27th of October 2022, is supposed to be a next-gen upgrade for the 2018 game of the same name. It's an ARPG in much the same style as the Diablo series, with real-time action combat, lots of abilities to use, levels to be gained, build crafting, and of course, a vast amount of loot to acquire and sift through. There's currently 4 character classes in the game, with a 5th to be added later, which each have 3 variations within them. They work as sort of specializations, allowing you to be quite specific regarding the kind of role that you want to fulfill. It's obviously set in the Warhammer 40k universe, and it's a game that has a rather small but passionate fanbase. And you know what? I include myself in that fanbase. I've been a long-time fan of Warhammer in all of its forms, and I bought the PS4 Complete Edition of this game a few years ago, which I did enjoy. So I suppose you might be wondering what's included in the Ultimate Next Gen Edition. What do you actually get? Well, you get the base game, all previously released DLC, access to the new upcoming character class, and of course those fabled next-gen performance upgrades. Oh, and I should point out that this edition doesn't affect the PC version of the game at all. This new release is completely separate from that and is only available on consoles. Right, so with all of that out of the way, let's talk about the issues. It's important for me to prefix this section by saying that I am a big fan of the game. As I said a moment ago, I owned the Complete Edition on PS4. I beat the game, I played the expansion stuff, and at the end of the day I did have fun with it. I played it on a PS4 Pro, and the performance left a lot to be desired back then. It ran at, I think, 30 FPS most of the time, but it did have relatively common frame drops, especially during heavy combat sections. It also had a small amount of screen tearing and stuttering. It can be a bit complicated because the original console release went through a ton of patches and stability improvements, so the quality of your experience with the older version of the game would have depended heavily on when you played it. For me, I'd say it was better than acceptable, but not exactly what I would call great. I recently read somewhere that the older version of the game had a 60 FPS PS5 patch that allowed the old PS4 version to hit 60 FPS when played on a PS5 via backwards compatibility. Unfortunately, I've not experienced that for myself. The PS4 and PS5 versions of this game are 100% separate apps, by the way. You don't download the PS4 version and then update it via a patch or anything like that into the PS5 version. You literally need to delete the PS4 version and then download the PS5 one. It's worth noting that all of your progress or any characters that you might already have in the PS4 version will be available in the PS5 version despite being separate applications. So I downloaded the new PS5 version of the game myself when it landed on the store because it promised me something. The same game that I enjoyed before, but with smooth 60 frames per second gameplay, native 4K resolution, and better quality textures and lighting. I felt like the poor optimization and performance in the older PS4 version didn't ruin my fun, but it did hinder it a little bit. So I thought, oh cool, I can play the game again, but it will look better, and most importantly, it will play better. I'll tell you, I was ready to lose many hours to this updated version, but I booted up the game, loaded into the hub area, and instantly, I felt like something was wrong. I started moving around and my god, it was almost indescribable. It felt and looked awful. The frame rate just fell off a cliff, and I would guess, in the mid to low 20s. When you're standing still, it's kinda hard to notice that anything's wrong, but the moment you start walking about, it all just goes to hell. Screen tearing is now far more common than it used to be, and somehow it runs worse than the old version did. As you're playing the game, just like moment to moment, it's nothing short of unpleasant to witness in person. I will just say though, it may not look as bad in the video that you're seeing now, and that's because I always record my stuff at 1080p 60 FPS, which does kind of smooth things out a little bit. But seriously, when playing the game normally through a TV, it's utterly atrocious. Also, I don't remember this being a thing in the original, but were you always able to see down here? Like down the back of the geometry? I can't remember it being like that, but maybe it was. Whatever though, I just wanted to point it out. When the action gets thicker and there's more enemies on screen, it's almost unplayable to me, and I'm not somebody who's usually sensitive to lower frame rates or frame pacing. I mean, do I want games to be at 60 FPS by default? Would I like 60 to be the minimum for current gen games? Sure, but I really don't mind a good game if it's at 30. At first, I was genuinely convinced that I'd done something wrong or that there was a setting I just hadn't seen, but nope, this is just how it is. I was so confused by what I was seeing that I had to go and do a few hours of research online. I looked everywhere that I could think of to find out what was going on, and after compiling all of the information, I think I understand the situation. So if you want to get the Xbox version of this update, I'm hearing that it looks pretty good and runs pretty smoothly between 50 and 60 FPS. Take this with a grain of salt, but it seems okay to pick the game up on Xbox if that's what you want to do. From what I've read, it's working almost exactly as it should be. However, on PS5, it's a totally different story. Obviously, I can't 100% confirm what I'm about to say, but from what I've personally experienced in my copy of the game, the following does seem accurate. Someone out there did some testing and they claimed that the dedicated PS5 version is struggling hard to hit 28 FPS, and once you get into combat it falls even further. The screen tearing is incredibly distracting and almost constant in some missions, and during some combat encounters the frame rate tanks to the low 20s, and I wouldn't be surprised if it drops below 20 at times. And look, frame rate isn't everything. I like tons of different games regardless of how they look or how they run, but what I'm getting here is flat out unacceptable. And believe it or not, this wasn't a free update. As I said earlier, it's a completely separate app which I believe retails at £50 in the UK and around $50 in the US. So if you've never owned the game before, you'd be paying that kind of price for this mess of a release. Originally, this was going to be your only purchase option, but after some backlash, which was more than justified in my opinion, the publisher decided to give owners of the old version a 50% discount on the new version if you bought it digitally. So that means you'd be paying around £25 or $25 if you already owned the previous version. This might sound a bit harsh, but frankly, even with the 50% discount, it's still kind of insulting. It was supposed to be a slight visual and performance update which also gave you access to a new character class later down the line. So I could see maybe £10 or $10 at a push, but $25 just seems very greedy to me. I mean, even if the update worked as it was intended to on the PS5, it would have still been way overpriced, at least as far as I personally perceive its value. Funnily enough, a lot of players were actually reporting that the discount wasn't even working properly at launch, so, they couldn't even do that correctly. And lastly, I just want to say that I'm obviously not a developer and I've never created a video game before myself. That said, I do have a very good understanding of the process, and as far as I understand the situation at the present time, this release is simply not good enough. I'm honestly tempted for the first time in my life to ask Sony for a refund on this one, and it sucks because I like the game and I want to play the damn thing. I'm almost convinced that they've accidentally uploaded an unpatched early build of the PS4 version to the PlayStation Network instead of the PS5 version. It's the only logical thing I can come up with because this kind of thing isn't an accident. They must have known about the awful performance. The game doesn't exactly develop itself, does it? I mean, are they trying to tell me that they had no idea that it runs like it does? Didn't they test it? Didn't they see that their new 4K 60 FPS update looks like crap and runs at 20 FPS? They absolutely have to have known, and it's really difficult for me to believe otherwise. I've been following gaming for nearly 30 years now, and I've watched the industry get so much better in some aspects while getting much worse in others. One of the most prevalent issues in gaming today is the release it now and fix it later attitude, and that's what this feels like, by the way. I mean, perhaps there's genuinely a good reason for it in this case, but if there is, they definitely haven't communicated it to us. And at the end of the day, I'd be annoyed if this was a free update, but the fact I had to pay for this makes it even worse. In 2022, we should not be accepting this kind of thing. These companies need to release stuff when it's actually ready, and not a moment sooner. I suppose it's important to say that all of these problems may have been fixed by the time you're seeing this video. If you're watching this 3 years into the future, for example, everything I've said here could all be irrelevant. As of right now though, which is about 2 days after release, I would advise everybody to stay away from the PS5 version of the game for now. And look, Inquisitor Martyr is a rather good ARPG underneath, so it really doesn't bring me any pleasure to put a video like this together. I wish I could have got this video out a little bit sooner, but I've been working on some other stuff and I bought the game day one like most people, so I've done my best to get the word out in a decent time frame. Ultimately, if you're looking to play this on a PS5, you'd be better off playing the patched PS4 version via backwards compatibility. As of right now, the PS5 version is unstable at best and virtually broken at worst. Sure, I didn't experience any crashes or game-breaking bugs, but still, for the time being, I strongly believe that this version of the game should be avoided. If you enjoy the video, I really hope you'll consider subscribing, and if you like what I do and want to help support the channel, please check out the first link in the video description down below. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.